It's hard to imagine spending almost all your teen years, as well as the rest of your life in prison. You would miss out on so much in life. You're taken away from your family and friends. You'll never drive a car, go to prom, get a job, or get a chance to get married and start a family of your own. You'll essentially have lost your entire future. If you break the law, you must face the consequences, and that was true for a boy named Lionel Tate. Lionel's freedom in life as he knew it ended. When he was just 14 years old in 2001, he became the youngest person to ever get sentenced to life in prison. While this punishment might seem extremely harsh because of what he did, it was definitely deserved. Lionel's horrific crime took place on July 28, 1999, in an area of Florida called Pembroke Park. Lionel was at home and his mother, Kathleen, was in the kitchen making a meal for him and a child she was babysitting. The child was a 6-year-old little girl named Tiffany Eunuch. Tiffany was the daughter of one of Kathleen's best friends, and her mother had asked if Kathleen could watch her for the evening. Kathleen and Tiffany's mother were like family and had grown up together in Jamaica before coming over to the United States. Doris, Tiffany's mom, was completely comfortable leaving her daughter in Kathleen's hands. After Kathleen finished cooking and the three of them ate dinner, she was feeling pretty tired, so she decided to go up to bed. She left Lionel and Tiffany downstairs watching television. Later that night, Kathleen heard some noise coming from the downstairs. Then she figured the kids were just playing around, so she shouted down for them to quiet down. Not going downstairs to investigate what was really going on would be something that Kathleen would regret for the rest of her life. Not long after Kathleen had heard the noise from downstairs, Lionel came into her room and woke her up. He told her that he and Tiffany had been playing wrestling when all of a sudden, she stopped breathing. Kathleen is, of course, panicked and in a state of disbelief. The story that Lionel would later tell was that he and Tiffany had been watching a wrestling show on television and decided to try out some of the professional moves. It was when he had put Tiffany into a headlock that she hit her head on the side of the table. The thought of Tiffany and Lionel even wrestling by itself is concerning due to the huge weight difference between the two of them. Tiffany was only 48 pounds when Lionel weighed close to 170. He would easily be able to overpower. Lionel told his mother that after Tiffany hit her head, she was sobbing uncontrollably. He didn't want to mess with her, so he just continued watching television. By the time he had suspected something was wrong and went to get his mother, Tiffany had already died. Of course, there were so many questions associated with this case. Did Lionel not know that the wrestling moves he was doing were dangerous? Did he not consider how much bigger he was than Tiffany? Had he meant to hurt her, or was this all a tragic accident? As investigators began to look into Tiffany's manner of death, they were shocked to see how horrifically her body was injured. It looked as if she had been hit by a car and clearly suffered tremendously prior to her death. She had been beaten barbarically and had a cracked skull, broken ribs, swollen brain, and a sliced liver, and was completely covered in bruises. It was believed that her beating had lasted for several minutes before her death. This was clearly no accident, you see. Lionel had a history with violence and aggression. He was a known bully at school and had been suspended countless times. It wasn't just that he didn't get along with other kids. He would also engage in criminal behavior and was even caught stealing. This was, of course, a bad reflection on Kathleen ultimately. Lionel would be arrested for Tiffany's murder and faced trial in 2011. The trial was obviously horrific, as the killer was so young and Tiffany had just been a defenseless child. One of the most disturbing aspects of the trial was when a video was shown to the court of Lionel reenacting what he did to Tiffany to a therapist. Tiffany's mom couldn't help but break down in tears when she watched it. The defense tried to tell the court that Lionel was struggling with a wrestling addiction, but the prosecution didn't buy it. I'm concerned that if the wrestling defense is allowed, this trial won't be about defendant Lionel's actions. Ken was also very concerned that Lionel's defense was trying to say that Lionel had mental health issues, as if that somehow excused what he did. They also tried to say that Lionel didn't kill Tiffany. He just beat her, and it was injuries that she died of, as crazy as it sounds. A psychiatrist on the defense team claimed that Lionel had become obsessed with wrestling because of how many Hollywood movies there were at the time depicting wrestlers as cool and powerful. He also claimed that Lionel simply never considered the fact that he was so much bigger than his opponent. They even said that Lionel was not emotionally mature yet and had no idea that he had been hurting Tiffany based upon just how severe the little girl's injuries were. This was pretty hard to believe, but the courts did end up making an IQ test on Lionel and found out that his IQ was strangely very below average. Was it possible that he was so unintelligent and unaware that he truly didn't think what he was doing would harm Tiffany? Lionel claimed that when he initially realized that Tiffany was hurt, he went to get some ice for her head, but when he got back, she ran to the bathroom to throw up. This is a likely sign that she was already suffering from a concussion. He also heard her making strange noises like she was struggling, but he just thought that she was being dramatic or messing with him, so he failed to call for help right away. When Lionel first told his mother about Tiffany's condition that fateful night, Kathleen rushed downstairs as fast as she could and tried to administer CPR, but it was too late, and the little girl would soon be pronounced dead at the hospital. Lionel told his legal team that he liked Tiffany and had no reason to hurt her. They believed him, but the prosecution team certainly did not. There had to be malice involved for Tiffany to have been beaten so horrifically. If Lionel didn't already look totally guilty, the fact that he frequently changed up the details of his story of what happened that night made his case look even worse. Desperate to bring him down, the prosecution ended up coming up with a plea deal that they offered him. They wanted him to admit that he knew his actions could lead to Tiffany's death, but that he didn't intend to kill her. The charge would be second-degree homicide, and he would only spend around 3 years in prison, considering the type of situation that Lionel was in and the possibility of him actually spending the rest of his life in jail. This deal must have looked pretty sweet, but strangely enough, Lionel's mother and the prosecution team urged Lionel not to take it. They thought that they could still prove Lionel's innocence. Kathleen stood by her son and said that what happened was simply no more than an accident. This must have felt like the biggest betrayal to Tiffany's mother, Kathleen's former best friend. Lionel's trial shocked the entire nation, and everyone waited in anticipation to find out what the jury was going to decide. The jury didn't come up with a conclusion right away. They actually ended up deliberating for 2 full weeks before finally finding Lionel guilty of first-degree murder. He would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He could be seen wiping away tears as he was then taken away to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Today, Lionel is 35 years old, and he remains behind bars.